All right. Hello, everybody. David, Dusty, hello. How are you?
Stuart,
Good.
hello. Dusty, hello.
This is
Hello.
Filling the Storehouse podcast. And wow, we have a really cool guest tonight, Dusty Bowling. I am pumped about this episode, this conversation that we're going to have. It's so Dusty wrote a book that I honestly never thought I would read. And David, I'll let David kind of speak on it too, but this is a book that I would have probably never read unless David recommended it to me because he was reading it with his family. And we'll get into that one and probably more of your books too. But welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, to be clear, Stu wouldn't have read the book only because he reads like self-help and real estate books.
Yeah.
I just want to make that 100% clear.
Definitely not what this is.
Yeah. I mean, it's 100% true.
Very-
Like, I don't think I've ever read a book like that in a long, long time. So it's good, but I loved it.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I always get a
Dusty,
kick out of it when, an unexpected reader comes along, to tell me, because a lot of my readers are, children and librarians and teachers. And so it's always fun. That's why when I saw you guys tag me, I was like, oh, that's fun. to
nope.
to military men reading my little book for children.
Well, it's funny because Stu, I mean, as all of our listeners know, is kind of like a child, but that's not the point. And Dusty, before we have you kind of talk about yourself, I just want to highlight. So this book, the context of it is there was a reading program at my kids' new school in Colorado, and one of the books on the list was Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. And we decided to read it on our cross-country trip. I was PCSing for a non-military permanent change of station. I was moving my family to Colorado, and we just decided, instead of watching movies and being on devices, that we are going to read. My wife read the book to my 3 kids in the back, and I'm sitting there, and I think by the midpoint of the trip, I was like, keep reading. And all the kids in the back were, the same. It was a hugely impactful book, super powerful book. I absolutely love it. It's giving me goosebumps even just thinking about the family impact, and just seeing the lessons that we were able to discuss with my kids were just so amazing. And I absolutely recommend this book to everybody. It was incredible. It's not a children's book. It's very deep. I mean, it's the intended audience, but it's very deep and profound. So on that, please tell us about yourself and just tell us a little bit about Dusty.
Well, I live in Arizona currently with my family. I have 3 daughters, 6, 10, and 18. The 18-year-old just went off to college, so that was tough.
Nice.
Watching one of them leave the nest, that was really hard. But she's doing good. She's going to Grand Canyon University. And so we live in New River for the time being. We're supposed to close on our house in about 2.5 weeks. So we won't be living in New River in 2.5 weeks, but our plans are all over the place. So we'll see when we get settled somewhere. So I live in the desert. I was born and raised in Arizona, in Scottsdale and Cape Creek and all that sort of area. And so I've lived here for most of my life. And definitely Arizona has influenced my writing and my storytelling, as well as, so many other experiences that I've had. I only started writing when I was about almost 30 years old, actually. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and I did some other jobs. I was a teacher for a little while, and I always loved reading so much. I've always been a huge reader, and I always, like a lot of people, I always thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to write my own book one day? And, I always felt like I had a story in me, as a lot of people say, but I thought, no, that's impossible. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. Nobody's going to want to look at anything that I have to write. I have no writing experience. I have no publishing accolades, nothing. And so finally, when I was like almost 30, I was like, if I don't try it, at least I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. And so that was when I started writing, and I actually self-published a few young adult novels just on Amazon, and I put them out there just for fun. I was like, oh, I'll never get published, but I'll just do this. And people seem to like, the stories that I told. And so when I wrote Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus, I thought, I'm really going to try to take this one all the way. I really care about this story. And so it was a tough road to go, but it was not impossible like I thought it was going to be. But you might be surprised to know that this book was rejected about 115 times.
What?
Or it
That's
got published.
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah. So I always like to tell, aspiring, published authors that, just because your book gets rejected a bunch, it doesn't mean it's not good. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Most authors have the same story that I do, 100 times, 200 times, 300 times. It's tough.
Wow.
Tough, but if you stick with it and you're willing to keep working on it. So yeah, and so it was the first book I ever published, and that was in 2017. And I have published, 3 more middle grade novels. I have one coming out next month, so that will be my 5th. And then I started a chapter book series about Aven when she was 8 years old, and 2 of those have come out so far, and there will be 2 more, and those are called Aven Green. So far there's been Aven Green Sleuthing Machine and Aven Green Baking Machine. And so those are for younger readers, and they're just like really fun, silly stuff with illustrations by Gina Perry, who's super talented, and just really fun, Junie B. Jones type of books, but a little bit older. So yeah, so that's about it.
Yeah, that's crazy. We had another author on, Bob Burke, and he was highlighting, he wrote a book that was incredibly influential for us as well. And he said it was a similar thing, like 100 times and rejected. And I'm just like, these books are amazing. So that's actually shocking. Stu and I want to write a book, and I'm like, oh man, we better really want it.
Yeah, you definitely have to really want it. And I think you have to be passionate about what you're writing about, which is another thing that I recommend is write what you really care about, what you're passionate about, because you will very likely end up not just reading your own story, but rewriting it many, many, many times. All my stories, by the time they're published, I've probably read them 50 to 100 times. And so you get sick of your own work. So the more you care about it, the more, passionate you feel about what you're doing, the more likely you are to get through that. I can't imagine, just writing a story, phoning it in, and then having to go through all that. That would be, it would be horrible. I would not like my job.
Well, you did an amazing job. I like similar to David. So David read the book with his family on his drive to Colorado, and we talked pretty regularly, almost, like every day. And he was like, "Dude, you gotta read this story. This thing is awesome." And I look it up, and I'm like, all right, So I ordered it and started reading it, and it's literally like the first book like this I've read in a long time. And I started reading it, and I'd be laying in bed, and I'd start like laughing, like out loud, and my wife would be looking next to me. She's like, "What are you doing? Like, this book is awesome." And then like the next minute I'd be like tearing up and crying. And so I really got into it. I think I read it in like 2 days. It was pretty awesome. But you mentioned how like long it took for you to get it accepted, and there's kind of like that theme in the book too. This, if I don't try it, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Like if I don't try to do hard things and put myself out there, like Aven did multiple times over, there and there's all these other themes that are kind of like woven throughout this book. And I'm just curious, a lot of these themes are somewhat heavy of a topic, for children. Are these themes something that you had experience with personally, or like how did you kind of put all this together? How did you create this story?
Well, this story came from a lot of different things that, kind of came together in one book. It was really a decade of thinking about it and different experiences that impacted me greatly in my life. And so the one experience that I would say really started the very initial spark of the story idea was something that was not a happy experience. It was a very hard experience. And it was about, 2008. So that was 13 years ago now, May 15th, 2008. So I got a phone call about my cousin who was in the Army, and he was serving in the war in Iraq. And I was told that he had been severely injured and he was in a coma, and they were flying him home. And if he woke up from his coma, he would spend the rest of his life with one eye and one arm. And, I'd known people with limb differences in my life. I have another cousin with one arm, and I've had teachers and with limb differences, friends. But I never really started to think about like how that would impact someone who just it happened to them later in life, and how he would adapt. And so I started doing a lot of research on how people live with one arm and how they do things, and how would he get a job, and how would he take care of himself, and how hard would it be for him to adapt to that. And I had just started writing at that time. It was when I just, I was almost 30, and I had just decided to start trying to write children's books. So I was always looking for books, different sorts of books. The way I study writing, because I didn't go to college for writing and I've never professionally studied writing, is I just read a lot. So I started looking up, trying to find books that had characters with limb differences, things like that. And back then, in 2008, there was like nothing. There was nothing. There were hardly any children's books that had any kind of character with a disability. And that really bothered me. And I was like, why should there not be characters like this? Why do all characters look the same? And so I started thinking maybe I should try to write a book like that. But it was like, I just started writing. It felt daunting. I didn't still know very much about it. And then unfortunately, my cousin ended up passing away after a while. So it was really painful for me to think about that. So I kept practicing and writing. And then around 2000, I think it was a few years later, I came across this video online of a woman named Barbie Thomas, who actually lives here in Arizona where I do. And in this video, it was like an old fuzzy like news video on the internet. She was just like working out at the gym and folding towels and changing her baby's diaper. And she was doing everything with her feet because she didn't have arms. And it was so eye-opening to me because as I really tried to learn a lot about how people live with one arm, I had never even thought about how a person would live with no arms. And so I started researching all I could find about people who live without arms. And I discovered, I found out it was Barbie Thomas, who is a bodybuilder who lives here in Arizona, and she's super cool. She's a friend of mine now. And then I discovered Jessica Cox, who also lives here in Arizona, and she's amazing. She's a motivational speaker. She goes all over the place talking to people, and she has her pilot's license and can fly a plane with her feet.
Wow, that's crazy.
She comes here to Luke Air Force Base when they do the air shows, and she'll fly. It's super cool. I discovered Letitia Wexton, who does the series Tisha Unarmed on YouTube, which everyone can look up. And she shows you how she does everything without arms, making a sandwich, taking a shower, she wears it like bathing suit or something.
Yeah.
She shows you a lot of, and so I watched all those videos, over and over and over. And I really started to develop this character in my mind who is really capable. She doesn't have arms, so she has this significant disability, but she's super capable. She does everything with her feet. And she's just like these women that I was discovering. And so then around the time I decided, okay, I really have to write this character. I've been thinking about this character for a couple of years now and researching, learning everything I could. My daughter, who just went off to college, she was just starting to have tics, and we would quickly discover that she has Tourette syndrome. And so that was heavily on my mind. And so what frequently happens is the things that, I'm thinking about all the time, that I care about, that I'm caught up in, they end up kind of making their way into my stories. And so that's how, Aven's story became a friendship story with a boy who has Tourette syndrome. And also I got really, I was getting really upset about when my daughter was developing Tourette syndrome, about the bad representation of it in movies and books and things like that, because it's always been portrayed for so long as people shouting bad words. And so I decided I wanted to put a character in there to really show people that most of the time, in the majority of cases, that is not what this is. And it causes a lot of confusion, and it causes a lot of a lack of empathy and understanding, for people with Tourette syndrome, because 2 of my kids now have tics. And so when, they'll tic in public, frequently they're met with like, be quiet or stop that, knock it off. And when they try to explain it, people are like, oh, you don't have that. Tourette syndrome, I know what that is. You don't have that. They've been told everything from, that's the cussing disease. That's when people shout bad words. And that's when people say a lot of F-bombs, things like that. And it's really hard on them. They shouldn't have to explain to people, people should just listen. And so anyway, that's how that all came about. And then, I put the setting of the theme park and the mystery and all that was based on a theme park here in Scottsdale that closed down a while ago that I grew up visiting. And I always thought that would make a fun setting for a book. And so I thought, why not for these two. So I ended up writing their story. And then on a rewrite, I decided to put them in the theme park because I rewrote it many times. So that's how that story really came to be.
No, that's super interesting. And you actually answered a couple questions that I had as far as like what was the motivation and behind it. And you know, it's what's interesting, and one of the things that, you know, Stu touched on it is, I mean, you talk about some very serious, powerful topics, right? You talk about everything from adoption to dementia, everything in between. And I think it just, but the way that you are able to just weave a story, and it's not like, it never felt overly heavy. Like there's a lot, I could see where it could easily be just like a bam, Tourette's and limb differences and dementia and adoption and, you know, rejection and this and that. And you're like, it is a lot, but you do it so amazingly that like Stu said, you're laughing, you're crying, you're just really getting into the book. And I'm just kind of curious, as a parent, you know, were you intentional about addressing these topics and the differences to kind of, you know, as a therapeutic to you and potentially working through the Tourette's? Because, you know, I did some research because of your book. I'd never have done research on Tourette's, but I watched a number of videos of people that were just kind of educating others, and it was so insightful, and it really built a sense of, like, you know, empathy. But I think you know, I started thinking of you as a parent, and like, is that the reason, or was it to kind of teach your kids through stories, or, you know, is storytelling always been a way for you to teach and express? It just was intriguing to me. So I'm curious how that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I'm writing, I'm always thinking of my three girls and, you know, what do I want them to take away from the story? What do you know, everything I write, I want to be a positive influence on them. I want to create positive role models for them. Sorry, there's a lot of noise in my house. And I wanted them to see themselves in a story as well. My kids have seen Tourette's representation. It's been really hurtful for them. As a matter of fact, my daughter stage managed a play where one of the characters had Tourette's syndrome and had these horror, you know, comedic outbursts. And it was like, she was like, ha 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 about it. But, you know, it's like, it's hard on them, you know, to always see it in that way. So I wanted to create it for them so that they could see an authentic representation and, you know, they could relate to it and also learn from it. And, you know, definitely like normalizing these disabilities. I wanted to do that for a lot of kids. And, you know, it's my hope that after they read it, if they come across someone with Tourette's or with a limb difference, you know, it won't seem so strange. And it will, oh yeah, I know what that is. I'm familiar with it, and it'll just feel normal to them. And maybe they'll be more likely to reach out to those kids and talk to them and get to know them. And that's kind of always the goal with my books, is just to sort of, you know, open our hearts and minds to all kinds of people.
You know, it's interesting to me that when you first started doing research on kind of these, you know, themes and topics, that there wasn't much else out there. Why do you think that is? I mean, do you think that America tries to kind of raise children in a bubble, and they don't like want to, I guess, get this out there and teach them about it? Like, I mean, why do you think there was nothing out there when you started writing books about it?
Yeah, I mean, up until what, like a while, like not that long ago, it was just there were no characters, like not just with disabilities, but it was like 99% of characters were white and middle class children, or, you know, it was just very much the same. And I just think that's what people were comfortable with at the time. And so there's been so much progress and like a real movement to diversify children's books, especially since I entered just like, you know, 5 years ago almost now. It's been incredible, like the push for more diverse books, for, you know, books about Black children, books about, you know, Hispanic children, books about, you know, Asian children, books, because I mean, when I was growing up, you didn't see that at all. And again, I just think that's just, I don't know, that was just what was put out. It was, you know, I can't explain why it was always like that, but I'm glad to see that it is changing greatly, and that there also is an expectation and a higher standard for what's being put out. So you can't just write a book with diverse characters and expect that you're going to be able to put it out and it's going to be okay. There's an expectation that you've done a lot of research, that you've created authentic characters, that you are not portraying people in a stereotypical or harmful way. And so it's really encouraged, you're encouraged to write diversely, but also, you have a job to do, and we're definitely held to a much higher standard. So with all of my books, I do love to write, diversely and write diverse characters. I always have sensitivity readers for all my characters. So like for Aven, I connected with multiple people who have this disability, shared the story with them, got to know them, made sure that they felt that the representation was authentic. And same thing with Connor, and any book I write, I like to write stories with Mexican characters because I live in Arizona and we have a big Mexican population. And so I like to authentically represent what life is like here. And so I always have, Mexican sensitivity readers to make sure that, even with our best intentions, we might put in something accidentally stereotypical. And so it's nice to just have a lot of eyes on it and making sure that, you're not going to ever put anything out that could make a child feel bad. I've seen that firsthand with my own children, how deflating that is when they're excited about a movie or a book or something, and then they watch it and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just happy to see it's getting so much better and changing, and that there's books out there for all kinds of children now, not just
so David and I have pretty small children. I have a 6-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy, and I'm excited about sharing this book with my 6-year-old daughter, just to kind of teach her that there's people that are different than her out there, right? And we live in a fairly affluent area, and most of the people are kind of the same, and so it's good to like have these conversations about these things, and to where like when she does interact with that person in the future, like it's gonna be okay, and she's gonna be nice, and she's gonna talk to that person. She's not gonna feel weird, and there's not gonna be I know there's a lot of bullying going on now in schools and online, and so it's really good to have these conversations with kids. I'm excited about having conversations with my kids about these type of topics. So I'm not really questioning that. I just thought it was really cool.
And you'll make a big difference in the way your children interact with people, I think, by taking that approach to your parenting. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. There's lots of besides just kind of all these like kind of heavy themes, there's lots of kind of smaller topics that teach children different values, values of bravery and courage, and values of acceptance and self-love and humor and belonging. All these things are in your books. Like, is there a certain topic that you think might be more important that you want your audience to come away with in a book like this?
More than anything, I just think, empathy is the main theme of the book to come away with. Just not judging someone from the first moment you meet them, because we never know why someone might be saying the things that they say, or dressed the way that they are, or doing the things that they're doing. And so taking the time to just listen and get, past our fear. And I think we can do that by really getting to know individuals. Sometimes it's hard to like sort of rewire our minds of all the stereotypes or things that we think, like even when this book first came out, I had people, who were like, oh yeah, it was funny and I liked it, but I think it was really unrealistic. And I was like, well, what's unrealistic about it? I just don't think Aven would ever be able to be that capable. And so it's like, it's really hard for people to get past their thinking. And I was like, well, I didn't give her any abilities that I haven't seen people with my own 2 eyes have, it's like, so, or it's like, oh, I've heard from so many people, like, I had no idea that Tourette's was like this. Like, I was so confused. And that's also why I decided to put in the Tourette support group. And I had that one character out of the whole group of kids who does have what's called coprolalia, where you say words as a tick, because I was like, I know people are going to be so confused. They're going to be like, but I thought Tourette syndrome was this. And so I put that in there so that they could talk about it. So yeah, I think just being open-minded and just wanting to get to know people and people who are different than what maybe we're used to or what we are. And I think that's how people really can develop empathy, really getting to know individuals.
What did he? I can't remember what he said. My kids like lost their minds because it was something with poop or fart or something, wasn't it?
Dexter, yeah, chicken nipple.
Chicken nipple. That's right.
Chicken nipple.
I know.
Totally forgot.
I know. They were like, but she put Dexter in there. And I had so many teachers who were like mad at me. Like, when I read this to my class, I can't believe how many
it's so funny.
words. I'm like, well, sorry, or they'll change it. They'll change it to like chicken elbow, or they just won't even, it's funny. So
That's so funny.
You know what? So sometimes it is, what people would think of as inappropriate words that they say. And so I just thought, well, what would be something that would be somebody would think of as being slightly inappropriate, but just silly.
That was hilarious. My kids.
Of course, I always want to make my readers laugh too. I like that. And I think humor is such a good way also to kind of open up people's hearts as well. It kind of like they let their guards down. And when when you laugh with somebody, I think that's such a connection right there.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, Zion, what was there a deeper motivation for him?
Yeah. So with this book specifically, more than any book I've ever written, I mean, I can go to every character and say, oh, that's based on this person from my life. And that's based on this person from my life. Zion is based just on a little boy that I knew when I was in first and second grade. And I tell you what, I cannot remember any single child from first and second grade except this one little boy. And I still remember his full first and last name, everything. And I mean, I've tried Googling him before because I'm like, I wonder what happened to him. I hope he grew up to be like a famous pop star or something. Yeah. But he was, bullied a lot. He was a larger child and he was bullied a lot. And I was so introverted and shy myself. He was very quiet and shy, and I was incredibly introverted and quiet. And so I've just always thought about him. I never said anything. I never spoke up for him, but it was really hard to watch when I was young to see a child bullied like that. And so I've always wondered kind of what happened to him. And so I thought of him when I created Zion.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned the feedback you get from, positive and negative, both the limiting beliefs that people have of others. But I'm curious, what kind of feedback, what kind of input are you getting from people that related with the characters that potentially are, have limb differences or struggle with, any of the number of things in the book that were presented?
Yeah, I get a lot of messages actually from people and parents of children who have limb differences, who have Tourette syndrome, and it's been really, really overwhelmingly positive. And I think part of that is like some of the things that we've talked about is that there have been more books that have come out with children with disabilities over the last several years. They're very heavy, they're very serious, they're very sad. A lot of times, or it's about like the child like overcoming their disability, things like that. It's still sort of othering, I guess you could say, of the characters. And so they're just really happy to see a story where the whole focus isn't on them overcoming the disability. Like my characters don't have anything to overcome except maybe their own shyness and insecurities and, their own, I don't know, just their own personal challenges, but it's not about overcoming their disabilities. Their biggest challenges are like how people perceive them. And so just making them a part of a regular story, but also the humor again, you don't really, you haven't really seen a lot of books with characters with disabilities that are really just lighthearted and humorous. Again, it's like always very heavy and dramatic. So they really like that, and the kids have really liked it a lot. And I visited schools with kids with limb differences, and one of the first school visits I did, they invited me because they had a child who didn't have the use of his arms, and so they were really excited to have this book for him. I just heard from a teacher just a couple of days ago, she has a new child in her first grade who doesn't have the use of her arms. And so I sent her a copy of my younger chapter books, and she was really excited. So just seeing themselves, they really love it. And they really like the representation by and large. I haven't really gotten any negativity or backlash, thank goodness, about the representation of the limb differences or the Tourette syndrome.
There's I have to mention this because I have, sometimes in the books I'll like highlight, star, circle, like underline, and there's one quote in this book that I have like starred and underlined. And it's when Aven's dad is talking to her about going up on the stage to play the guitar. And he says, "No one lights a lamp and hides it under a basket. They put it on a table so it can shine for all to see." And
Did you recognize that?
awesome.
That's very, very biblical.
Yes, it is. So, when you're Christian working in secular publishing, sometimes you slip a little bit of something into your books, and most people don't notice. It's been very rare that people do notice that I do that in some of my books. So yeah, you have to, I think, know that to recognize it. But yeah, a lot of people don't.
I love it. And it's just like makes my heart heavy because I immediately think about, again, my own kids and, trying to raise them and push them and like, find their light, and so it also really, again, in the book, there's this another theme that I saw in the book is that everyone can be an influencer, everyone can be significant, and everyone can have an impact on others, regardless if they don't have arms or if they have Tourette's or if they're overweight. And I really love how you portrayed that, to have Aven just be this huge influence in all these other people's lives and the influence on the business, of the park and all this other stuff. And I wonder how, besides, just reading the book to my daughter or my kids, like I wonder how else to really teach this lesson, especially to kids that maybe are shy and they're kind of state art themselves. Like, have you gotten any feedback from other people that have kind of had issues like that? Or I'm just curious.
Issues with
Just being like introverted and shy and not kind of wanting to put themselves out there and feel significant in any way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we all deal with that to an extent and in our own way. And I think that, everyone has something significant to offer this world. Every child, I'm always speaking specifically to children, and every child definitely has something special to offer this world, no matter who you are. And your challenges do not have to define you. I was always really shy and insecure child all the way up. I carried that with me up into adulthood, up to the point where, I'm telling myself, you can never write a book. You can never do that. No one will take you seriously. I think it's possible to grow and to put yourself out there. It takes risks. It can be very scary. And sometimes baby steps are necessary, like for me. But I never thought that I would be, doing the things that I'm doing and public speaking, things like that. I mean, I would have died, and so, sometimes just taking baby steps toward your goals can be hard when you haven't had a lot of confidence and things like that. And it definitely helps, I hope, for children that they have someone in their lives encouraging them and telling them that they can do these things. And, that it doesn't, just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't do it. A lot of things in life are really hard. For me, this whole journey has been really, really hard, and it continues to be hard all the time, but it doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And it doesn't mean I shouldn't be doing it. Sometimes the hardest things are the most fulfilling and the most worth doing. So I just want to encourage everyone to take those baby steps toward their goals and just hopefully believe that they can get there at some point. And even if you never get to that ultimate big, giant, whatever it is, goal, nothing is ever wasted. Nothing is ever lost. It's all a learning experience. It's a growing experience. So even if I never got published, I like to think that, I would have gained so much from this whole experience of just writing and discovering so much about myself and getting to know other people and learning so much about other people. So everything is a growing learning experience. You just have to be willing to take a little bit of a risk here and there, I think.
No, I love that. That is awesome. One thing, and it very related to what you just said, but your book, it makes me want to be better. it makes me want to be a better human being, a better father, a better advocate, just a better Christian. And I'm kind of curious, how can we be better? Like what, how can we,
There's a lot
how
of
can
things you could be
we,
better at, dude.
yeah, and not me specifically, because that's a whole nother
I
like
wish I had
3-hour
like the
podcast.
secret answer to that. How can
Yeah.
we
Well,
be better?
but I guess, and I know that's a huge question, but let me frame it a little bit better. Like what are the practical resources or things that we can do that and specific to, we'll narrow it down to limb differences and Tourette's and obesity. How can we come outside of our shell or be intentional and not make someone feel awkward, right? Because sometimes people try too hard, or sometimes they don't try at all. Like, how do you, as a mother of somebody with Tourette's, like, how does someone like me who doesn't have that experience, how am I better?
Well, I think always just being authentic and honest. I think sometimes when people are talking and they're uncomfortable and they're trying to put on an act like, oh, I'm not, or I'm just I think, honestly, I don't know, but I know that I think asking questions and being interested in other people can help to sort of, lower your nervousness or whatever it is that you feel, questions obviously that aren't, just wanting to get to know a person like, oh, hi, where did you come from? And, if it's a child, it's like, where do you go to school? Oh, what do you like to do? What do you like, not necessarily like, oh my gosh, where did your arm go or something, but even like with my kids, if someone would just be like, oh, why do you do that with your face? They wouldn't mind it, because then they could say, oh, I have Tourette syndrome and it's one of my tics. Instead of sometimes, kids will mimic them, or they'll come up and they'll be like, that's weird. It's like, just if they just asked, why do you do that? Obviously they're not doing it deliberately. They don't want to be made fun of. So I think it's okay to ask questions of people. And I think the more you learn about them, then the more authentic, of a conversation you can have with them, and that nervousness will hopefully go away. And if you do accidentally ask a question that, the other person's a little uncomfortable answering, that's going to happen in life. I don't know what to say. There's no perfection here, and, just say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just curious. And, I would like to get to know you. And I'm sure that the person could not be that offended about that.
I thought it was pretty cool that Aven, there was a part of the book that she kind of described, like, I wish people would just do this thing, right? Like not act, not act a certain way, or not pretend like, like look at where my arm should be, or I don't remember all the specifics that she laid out, but, not pretend like I don't have arms, like just to acknowledge it. And I think that was something I took away from the book. Like, that's a very valuable lesson. And talking to my kids about that specifically, like, hey guys, if you meet somebody, like what, how do we act in this situation? How do you, you don't have to pretend like someone's not in a wheelchair. Like they're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
They know they're in a wheelchair, and they know that when you're looking at them, what's going through your mind. So how do you treat somebody with compassion, love, and dignity and respect, right? Just like you'd want to be treated. So I thought that was a great lesson from the book as well.
I'm just gonna turn it's suddenly gotten dark. I'm gonna go turn my light on. Right.
Not a problem.
Sorry about that. But yeah, and then just not, of course, not making assumptions about anyone, until
right. That's always I think that's always a great approach that we could all do a little bit better with.
Yeah, we were actually, David and I were actually talking about that a little bit on the podcast previously to this one that just came out this week, about just maybe not give your opinion immediately and just sit back and listen a little bit, and kind of think about how other people are feeling and where they're coming from. And there's a lot can be said to that.
Slow to speak, quick to listen.
I was just gonna say that was actually one of the verses that we talked about, because that's one of the biggest challenges for me.
For everyone. I think we all want to hear ourselves talk. We're all so interested in what we have to say, but I found that just reminding myself a lot throughout my life, when I am meeting someone, again, just I find that my connection with them is so much stronger when I do ask a lot of questions of them. And then I sit and I fully listen to them explain their answers instead of jumping in and adding my own 2 cents and things like that. And it's helped me a lot in my life. I think that is a wise, it's definitely
That's awesome.
piece of advice.
Yeah. Well, hey, before, I know we're cutting short on time, but I want to at least give you a chance to kind of plug your next book, because you have a book coming out pretty soon in October, correct?
Yeah, October 12th. It's called Across the Desert. I have an advanced copy right here. This is not the final version, but it comes out on October 12th. And it is about this little girl here, 12-year-old Jolene.
Okay.
Lives in downtown Phoenix with her mom, and they are quite poor. And her mom is an opioid addict, which is something that I grew up with my parents. And so every day, Jolene over the summer walks to the Phoenix Public Library about a mile from her house, from her apartment, even though it's like super, super hot, because she wants to use the internet. She doesn't have internet at home, which is something a lot of kids deal with. And she wants to look at books and do other things, but mostly she wants to use the internet and the computers because she likes to watch this live stream show that another little girl does who lives out in the desert. She calls herself Addie Earhart, and she flies this ultralight trike around the desert, and she calls herself the Desert Aviator. That's the name of her show, the Desert Aviator. Her mom does not know she's doing this.
That's awesome.
So Jolene, and her are kind of becoming friends online through the online chats and stuff, which is another thing a lot of kids are experiencing. They make friends online. My kids definitely have online friends. We monitor it and everything, but so she's becoming friends with her, and she watches her show. And one day while she's watching the live stream, Addie crashes and she loses the video. And so she knows that she's out there in the desert and she's crashed her ultralight. And she also knows that her mom doesn't know what she's doing. No one else knows she's out there. And so Jolene tries to get help, tries to tell people from the librarian to the fire department like that, there's this little girl and she's out in the middle of the desert. I saw it on a video. And she doesn't have a real name. She doesn't want anyone coming to her house because of her home situation. She's really scared. And, how would you react if some young 12-year-old girl came up to you and was like, I saw this on this video. You have to send help out to the middle of the desert to help this nameless girl. Basically, she's blown off. And so she decides to take matters into her own hands. And she decides to go out and save her friend. And so that is Across the Desert. And I'm really excited about it because I got to talk about, it was hard to write. It was my pandemic book, which was really, really tough. It was really hard to stay creative and motivated during this time period. But I just kept thinking about like all the kids out there who were like me, dealing with alcoholic parents, drug addicted parents, and how hard that is. And again, when I was young, there were no books with that subject matter for my age group, like 10 to 14. It was like, there was nothing like that out there about kids dealing with parents who were, substance abusers. And it was really hard. I would have loved to have seen my own situation reflected. I think it could have given me some comfort and some hope to feel like I'm not the only one dealing with these things. And so I'm really glad to have written this story, to get to talk to kids and tell them a story about a girl who's dealing with something that a lot of them I know out there are dealing with. So that kind of kept me going, like, I gotta get this story out there because I think kids really need it. And, there's so many more out there than we probably could even realize who have alcoholic and drug addicted parents. And so hopefully it brings them some comfort. And, I also like to wrap my heavy messages up in a fun, lighthearted adventure. So that's kind of my MO, I guess, is like heavier subjects, sort of disguised in this lighthearted, exciting adventure. And that's kind of like what my books have become. So yeah, so that's Across the Desert. And then I will have more in the future. I have a story coming out in 2023. It's really early. I just finished the rough draft of it. So that's a long way off. And that's called Dust, which I know, Dust by Dusti Bowling. No one already, I get a lot of,
That's awesome.
About my name. They're like, that can't be your real name. That's what I write. And I'm like, no, it really is my real name, but everyone thinks it's a pen name, but it's not. So now they're really not going to blame me because I wrote a book called Dust. And then I have, the next two in the Aven Green chapter book series coming out, which those are really fun. So And I'm not sure if there will be more of those after that, but hopefully I just will be able to keep putting out stories.
Super cool.
Yeah. No,
We actually, one of our my sister-in-law works for the Dallas in Dallas, Texas, Dallas Children's Advocacy Center, and we had her on, and I'm just kind of thinking about, you know, this book Across the Desert, like how perfect it would be for a lot of the people, you know, a lot of the children that they deal with at the Children's Advocacy Center. And David and I are gonna probably get involved with the one here in Denver when he comes back. So yeah, I'll put that on my list to read too, and get that out there.
Thank you.
yeah, and if you need any additional Latino sensitivity readers, just send me all your stuff. It's fine. We'll take care of that for you.
I might take you up on that, because I
Hey, awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, we have such a big vibrant Mexican population in area. So, you know, I really like to reflect that in my books. You know, growing up, I grew up with so many kids from Mexico coming to school there for the first time, some that were still learning English. And so, you know, I want my books to authentically represent, you know, living here in Arizona. So.
Now, you know, and as we kind of wrap it up, Dusty, I just want to thank you for your bravery in kind of going outside the mold. This book was vastly different than any book I've ever read. It was definitely different than any book that we've ever read to our children, and it was hugely impactful. I can't even express to you how much it brought my family, more than any other book that we've ever read. It brought my family together in conversation and depth, and I tell you, like, it's been a while since I've kind of, like, I'm even tearing up now just thinking about, like, the spaghetti straps. Like, it just keeps popping in my head, and that scene, and just the empowerment of, you know, this young woman. I think about my daughter and my boys, and how to teach them to be empathetic and loving, and just, there's so much amazingness to this book. I hope all of our listeners go grab a copy. I promise you will absolutely not regret it. And just thank you so much for just, you know, wrapping your faith into this, and just having such an amazing heart for those that are different, for these children, and I say different, for those that just have different challenges that some of us may not necessarily face. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the other topics that you somehow make into funny stories that really motivate people. It's pretty awesome. So
thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed my time with you too.
Yeah, Dusty, where's the best place for everyone to go get your books?
Well, I always recommend going to your local independent bookstore. You know, they can use support for sure. And if they don't have them on the shelf, you could always ask if they could order them, and that's great. Otherwise, you know, Barnes and Noble usually carries most of my books, or you can order them online from most any online retailer. I hate to say go to Amazon, but you can do that if you want to.
Or your website, right?
Yeah, so I have links to a lot of online retailers on my website. Yeah, my website is just www.dustybowling.com, and I have information about all my books on there that you can read about. And yeah.
Cool. And we'll put the links in our show notes, and maybe we can get some of the videos that you're talking about from you know, the people that you were doing research on. We'll post some of that stuff too. I'll hit you up afterwards and get some links.
That would be great. Yeah. I think people would like that. And
Dave,
thank you too for your service also as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, guys and gals, hey, go check out Dusty's books. Like David said, amazing, like super impactful. If you have kids, you got to check these out and let your kids read it, or read it to them. Talk about this stuff. It will be, you know, you can be an influencer to a lot of children in the future by reading these books. So like this, share it, give us, you know, a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. And most importantly, go fill your storehouse.
Make it a great day. Thanks,
Dusty.
Dusty.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.